Okay, so we want to thank everyone for joining us today for our free webinar called Designing Software for Meaningful User Experiences. What we're going to discuss today is how interfaces affect users. And we're also going to talk about conceptualizing user interaction to design meaningful use. We'll also discuss designing for collaboration. We'll talk about users' activities and performance. We'll also discuss comparing your software with your competition. And lastly, methods to incorporate usability into the design process. So who is today's webinar for? Today's webinar really is for anyone who's involved within the design process of a piece of software, anyone who's involved in a software company, and anyone who uses technology. So the first thing that I'd like to do is just give you a brief introduction about us, myself, and my company. Just a real quick overview of Situated Research. If you weren't directed to our website when you registered for today's session, our company deals mostly with usability and the overall user experience. And that is our primary goal here at Situated Research. And we apply that to the three divisions that we have. The first one is our web design and social media division. So any website has to be user-friendly. If you go to a website and you can't navigate through it and you can't find the information that you need right away, it's not user-friendly. You're going to leave. So what's the point of even having it? So we apply that with all of the websites that we design or redesign, or we can help companies make their website more user-friendly by giving them plans and having users come in and actually test the website and then giving that feedback back to the company. And then they can have their team implement it. Incorporate within that division, I'm really big on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and we help businesses get the word out about their great websites, about their great products. So we do that through social media. Our next division is our software/products division. And this is where we help software companies and any company that comes up with a product to make it more user friendly. So anything that you use in your everyday life, we can help with. Recently, we got some projects with some automotive companies. We're helping with the navigation within the car. We're also helping with the navigation of buttons within the car and the user interface in the dashboards. We've also recently helped a couple of software companies locally and also in California to develop their software and to make it more competitive with their competitor software. So we did some comparative analysis there. And we also have our video game division. Our video game division is huge. We work with EA, Disney, Sony, just to name a few. And these are companies that we work with. We help to either make bits and pieces of their game more user-friendly or the overall game. So our main focus here is usability and the overall user experience. My name is Michelle Ann Sherritt. I have a degree in behavioral psychology, and I have about 17 years of marketing experience. I come from a very strong track record of helping software companies improve their products. We have Dr. Matthew Sherritt on our team, and that's really why and what inspired Situated Research. He focused strictly on usability and the overall user experience within educational video games. So he took educational video games and brought them into a classroom setting. He analyzed how they take what they learned in the classroom and applied it to the games. And he also looked at the overall usability. We write books on several different topics, mostly usability and social media. We write several journal articles and we present at conferences. We always conduct free webinars, and we also have those free webinars available on our website as well as our YouTube channel. So real quickly, just a little history about Situated Research. We started it at the end of 2008, and we are located in the suburbs of Chicago. We have about 25 employees. We have great backgrounds. If you go to our team page, everyone that we hire has an exceptional background. They have worked for some really big companies, and they have a really strong track record. Everyone comes from a diverse background. Not everybody has worked at big companies. Some have worked at smaller companies, but the background that they bring to us is very diverse. It's excellent, and we only take the best of the best. So if you do have a project done by us, know that. So let's talk about user experience design. First of all, what is user experience design? When you're thinking about doing a project, making a piece of software, you have to think about the overall user experience. What is the user going to think when using your product? So you want that experience to be memorable. You also want to make sure that it's enjoyable, because if they don't enjoy their experience, most likely they're not going to repeat the experience, meaning they're probably not going to use your product anymore. And if they don't use your product anymore, that's going to spread like crazy, especially with social media now. Word spreads like crazy. So you want to make sure that it's a memorable experience as well as an enjoyable one, that it's fun to use. And it creates excitement, because if it does, people are going to tell other people. Make sure it's a positive emotional connection that they make with your product, and make sure that they want to use it again and again and again. Avoid difficult to use at all costs. So some of you are sitting there and saying, okay, well, this kind of seems like a no-brainer, and it really does, but you'd be surprised at how many software companies don't do this. They just have a main goal to solve a particular problem for a company, and that's all they think about. And they don't think about how is the user going to interact with this piece of software. It just doesn't even cross their mind. And if it does, it's for just a small amount of time. And then they don't think about it again. Their main objective is to hit that goal, the problem that the company's having, and that's it. So usability. When we talk about usability today, you have to know what usability is. Usability encompasses a lot of different things, but it requires less mental effort. So if something is user-friendly, it shouldn't require a whole lot of thinking. There are many websites that we evaluate. We do a free usability report on companies' websites. And the one thing that we see over and over again is where you'll scroll over a button and it has to tell you what the button does. Whenever we evaluate software, we do the same thing, and we have the same problem come up over and over and over again. You should never, ever, ever have to tell your user how to use something. If you do, it's overcomplicated. You shouldn't have to do that. You also want to make sure if something is user-friendly, that it avoids making users make mistakes. So the fewer mistakes, the more user-friendly your piece of software is. Make sure, of course, that that piece of software accomplishes a certain task. So yes, it's important to get a company's task out there. What is their objective for building this piece of software? What problem is it going to solve? Let's make sure that we accomplish that. But don't forget about the user in the overall design process. You also want to make sure that whatever that goal or task is, that the user is able to achieve it quicker. And make sure that it's fast to learn. If it takes a lot of training, then you're going to get a lot of questions. It's not going to be that user-friendly because they're going to have questions. Users are going to put up your software on their computer, start to use it, and they're going to be calling you, saying, this isn't easy to learn. How do you work this part? I'm not sure how you do this. Supervisors are going to be calling you. Your customer phone line is going to be going crazy. So you want to make sure that that feedback is positive, that it's good, and that the user says, yeah, it was easy to learn. It was really fast. Now we're also going to talk about user interface. And when we talk about user interface, first you have to know what that is. User interface, take your phone for instance, your smartphone. The display that comes up, that's your user interface. That's what you're going to be using. If you're using a cable box, the front of your cable box is your user interface. So whatever you're going to be interacting with is your user interface. You want to make sure that the overall experience with that is positive and not confusing. A real quick example is that Matt and I, Dr. Sharon and I, we had a receiver hooked up to all of our speakers and our whole audio system. And just the past weekend, we had some strong storms come through, and the National Broadcast Center came up for the weather and to give us, an issue and say there's bad weather coming. And it's always louder than what you're listening to on the TV. And why they do that, I don't know. But it blew our receiver. Our receiver stopped working. We had no more sound. So we had to get a new one. So we got a new receiver, and the user interface stunk. We had to download an app for our iPhone in order to use the receiver, because we got an open boxed receiver because it was cheaper and it didn't come with a remote. So the remote that we had to get was on the iPad, or I'm sorry, on the iPhone. So we tried to use that, and we put different things. You have to program everything that's going to be connected to the receiver. And the user interface had things on there that we didn't even have connected to the receiver. And we were like, well, if we don't have this connected to the receiver, why is this even an option? And then we used our Harmony remote, our universal remote, and tried to program that up. And the user interface on the website did not talk us through anything. It was very confusing. And if Dr. Sherritt didn't know what he was doing as far as hooking up audio equipment, we would have been hosed. So the user interface was really poor. To say the least, we wrote them a letter and told them what we do, and hopefully we'll be able to help that company. I won't say the company's name because that's just not a good idea, but hopefully we'll get a project out of that. But it was really bad, and we talked to other people too, and they're like, oh, I got that receiver too, and we couldn't figure it out. We had to have Best Buy Geek Squad come by and help us. So added expenses. That's just a prime example of a user interface not being user-friendly. The aesthetics have to be right. Maybe the icons don't go with the labeling. So if it doesn't, it becomes confusing for users. And the overall look and feel of it has to look aesthetically pleasing to you so that you want to use the interface. So the learning objectives that we want you to get from today's session is to better understand the benefits of conducting usability testing and research. You have to do this throughout the whole design process of a piece of software, product, whatever it is. Whatever you're developing, it has to be prominent throughout the whole process. Now, during today's session, I want you to think about everyday software. Think about what you use daily. What do you use at work? What do you use when you get home? What do your kids use? What programs help you during the day? What programs don't help you? And also, what programs just make you plain frustrated? There are certain questions to ask yourself. These things that you use in your everyday life, do these software tools work for you all the time? Do you become frustrated at any point while using them? Do you feel like banging your head on your desk every time you use it? I don't know how many friends I have that go to work or using a piece of software. They're like, I just hate it. I wish they would just bring something else in that would be useful and help me during my work day. And I just can't use it, and I can't figure it out, and it messes up all the time. And there's so many stories like that. And they always come to us and they're like, can you write this company and tell them that they have people complaining? And so we do contact the companies. But do you have a piece of software at work that just frustrates you, or when you get home? If you answered yes to any of these questions, have you ever thought of why you feel this way? Well, the reason is because it wasn't user-friendly. The developers and the designers did not have the user in mind throughout the whole process. Most likely, usability research and testing was not conducted, and it's obvious when you use it. Now, when I do this webinar, which is twice a year, I always have designers email me and say, when was the last time you designed a piece of software? Well, we don't design software. Well, then you have no idea how the design process works, and blah, blah, blah. They just go on and on and on and on. Usability has nothing to do with that. You have to think about the user throughout the whole design process, and you have to have people who know how to do research and testing be able to do it. A lot of designers will say, oh, well, we brought in a couple users and had them tested and we got their feedback and we fixed those problems. Usually the testers that they have in are high school students, high school level, or their current employees. Well, I hate to break it to you, but current employees aren't going to give you the feedback that you need. They're not going to say, oh, this company that I work for, I'm going to tell them that their product sucks. Or I'm going to tell them that it has a lot of issues because I'm a product tester. No. And even if they did, they're not looking at the overall user experience. They're just looking at the interface. They're just looking for glitches within the design to tell you, hey, when you get to this certain part, there's a glitch here. We need to fix it. That's important, but they're not looking at the user experience. They're not looking and saying, oh, well, this is how I felt while using this part, and this is what I think about this, and this is how this would pertain to my everyday life, and it would be more helpful if we did this. They're not looking at any of that. And a lot of things they can't even pick out. So if you have a company that knows how to do usability research and testing, they're going to bring outside users in. They're going to test the piece of software. They're going to videotape it, and they're going to do deep analysis on that tape. They're going to be looking at behavioral psychology. They're going to be looking at the HCI, the user interface, all of that good stuff that put together makes the overall user experience. And you can only do that if you know how to do research and testing properly. So what happened after you answer all these questions? What happened with these products? Well, no user testing was done, or it wasn't done properly. They didn't keep the end user, you, in mind throughout the whole process, and they didn't conduct enough testing, if at all. And if they did, it wasn't properly done. So I love Darth Vader here saying, testing, I find your lack of testing disturbing. We see this all the time, and it's so frustrating. We have software companies that come to us that say, hey, we put out this piece of software to the public and it didn't sell very well. Or they say, oh, it sold great, because we advertised it like crazy, but our customer service line is ringing off the hook. We need to come out with a new version of it. We need to make it better. Now we understand that we need usability testing and research throughout the whole process. Can you help us make the second version better? We can do that, but the problem with that is that it's already left a bad taste in those people's mouths. So most likely they're not going to buy your second product. So it's always good to have user testing and research done from beginning to end. There's a software development process that companies just aren't aware of, and it consists of analysis, design, and acceptance. As far as analysis goes, you have to understand the overall user's needs. You also have to explore and choose directions and opportunities that make sense to meet those needs. Then you have to design. You have to build the system and its interface. You have to optimize the design in order to improve usability. And finally, acceptance. You have to evaluate what you did. And you have to continuously improve the product quality and usability. So how do you do this? The analysis part, understanding your user's needs and exploring the directions and opportunities. You do ethnographic studies. You do interviews. You do surveys, user scenarios, workflow modeling, focus groups, etc. As far as design goes, you have to do prototypes, sometimes card sorting, usability testing, participatory design, etc. These all sound like academic-y terms, and how do you pertain this to usability and get it all for the overall user experience? But it can be done if you know what you're doing. And finally, it's acceptance. You do usability testing at the very end. You do heuristic evaluation. You do surveys, etc. You get feedback. Of course, here at Situated Research, when we do our testing, we look for glitches within the software's interface, but we go above and beyond that. We want to look at the overall user experience. So that leads us into user experience design. So what is the user experience? We have this awesome chart here that kind of breaks it down for you and what's involved in creating the ultimate user experience, which is what we do here at Situated Research. You start at the bottom. You have to have your site objectives, your user needs. Then you have to have your functional specifications and your content requirements. Then you have to go after interaction design and information architecture. Then you look at your interface design, your navigation design, and your information design, and then you have your visual design. So you start at the very bottom and you work your way up to the ultimate user experience. So the main objective, make a product easy, effective, functional, and enjoyable to use from the user's perspective. I won't tell you how many times software companies do not encompass proper usability testing and research throughout the whole process. And they say, well, our designers said, oh, this is going to be easy, effective, functional, and fun to use. Well, that's the designers who are designing it. And if you're a designer, that's your perspective. You feel it's going to be great according to your own experience, but you're not thinking about the typical average user who will use it. Someone who's sitting at their desk, who's a mom, who has children and has to get off of work at 5 o'clock and has to get certain tasks done during the day in a certain time period, and they're crunched and they have deadlines. You're not thinking like that. You're thinking like a designer, and you have the objectives and the tasks from the company, and that's what you go with. And you say, I solved that problem. But you're not thinking about the profile of the user who's going to be using the product. That's what matters in the end, because they're using it. And if they can't use it, what's the point? Now let's talk a little bit about software usability. What is your goal here? Well, a lot of companies' goals are to sell as much of a good product as possible. That's pretty much everyone's goal. But you cannot do that if your product is not good. Now, as the example I gave earlier about the software company who came to us and said, we put out this piece of software. It sold like crazy because we did a lot of good advertising. We're a well-known software company and our other products were really good. And then our customer service line started ringing off the hook. I have this problem. This doesn't work here. I don't like this part. I don't know how to use this part. I need training, blah, blah, blah. Thought this was supposed to help solve this problem. It doesn't. It causes a new problem. So they wanted to come out with another version of it. Again, they didn't design for the user. So first of all, when you're designing, you have to think about what to design. You have to take into account who the users are. So come up with user profiles. Do some research. What activities are being carried out? Actually interview the types of people who will be using your software. Where the interaction is going to take place, at home, in an office, in the car, mobily, where is it going to be? You need to optimize the interactions users have with a product so that you can match the user's activities and needs. This, I'm telling you, is rarely done. And some software companies say, oh yeah, we do that in the planning and brainstorming process. You know, we think about that at the beginning, but you guys make it up. You don't do research. You don't go out and say, oh, you're our typical user. You're someone who's going to buy this piece of software. How are you going to be using it? That's never, ever done. So you have to work toward mastery. And here at Situated Research, we want to be involved from the beginning to the end. It's not so that we can charge a lot for consulting. It's not so that we collect a lot of money. It's so that your product, when it goes to public, is good. People want to buy it. The word gets spread. They buy more and more of your product. We only want to make our customers or clients happy. We want to make sure that they sell as much of their product as possible. If you're not profitable, we're not going to be, because you're not going to come back to us. So we want to make sure that you're successful. So we have to be involved from the beginning to the end. So from the time that you develop the idea integrate usability, involve users, because that's going to lead to an exceptional product and you're going to sell a lot of it. In order to design the best design, you have to understand the user's needs. So what people are good and bad at, you should look at. Consider what might help people in the way they currently do things. What will provide quality user experiences? Listen to what people want and get them involved. Use tried and tested user-centered methods. These are all things that software companies should be doing but aren't. So what is interaction design? We talked about this when I showed you the chart of the user experience. Interaction design is designing interactive products to support the way people communicate and interact in their everyday and working lives. This is by Sharp, Rogers, and Priest. And so you want to make sure that the products and software are interactive. That usually a piece of software is used at work or home. And a lot of the pieces of software that we work with are for work. So you have to think about the user who's sitting at their desk working, and this piece of software is supposed to make their daily life at work easier. It probably also makes a task go faster. Well, it can't make the user at work, an employee, more active, more accomplished in doing their goals for the day quicker if it's not user-friendly. If they had to keep stopping and figuring out, oh, well, what does this do? Oh, let me look in the manual. Let me call customer support. They shouldn't have to do that. If something needs to be explained to them, like we talked about earlier, then it's not user-friendly. And this happens all the time. We see this all the time. We have companies who contact us who had a piece of software made for their specific company to complete a certain task. And they come to us and they say, you know, this company made this piece of software for us, but we just can't use it. It's not making our lives easier. Can you help us? And so then we have to contact the software company, and then all three of us are involved and we have to start all over. So it's not very cost effective, especially for the software company, because a lot of software companies kind of had to eat those costs and fix it for their clients and then pay us on top of it. So it's not very cost effective. In interaction design, you're creating user experiences. So you enhance the way that people work, communicate, and interact. You want to support users. You don't want to restrict them. So you have to think in terms of the task, not in terms of the overall system. And I'll say it again. Think in terms of the task and not in terms of the system. The reason why I repeat that is because software companies just don't do this. Again, they think about that end goal. Well, this company came to us and they have this problem, let's fix it. You have to think about user mental models as well. You have to encompass all of this in usability when you design a piece of software or a product or whatever you're designing, anything that users are going to be using. So the goals of interaction design is to develop usable products. And usability means easy to learn, effective to use, and provides an enjoyable experience. So that means you have to involve users in the design process. And a lot of designers just don't like to do this. And the reason why is because it delays the project. Well, I hate to break it to you, but it's not going to delay the project if you incorporate it throughout the project. Some of our usability testing and research takes a week, tops. And you get all the feedback that you need each step of the way. So each step takes about a week, sometimes longer, depending on the size of the project, but you get that feedback right away. You get to improve the product sooner rather than producing the product, putting it out to the public, gain a bad reputation, and then having to design a second version of it. That's not very cost effective if you think about it. So which kind of design are you doing? A number of other terms used emphasizing what is being designed. So user interface design, software design, user-centered design, product design, web design, experience design, all of these designs. Interaction design is the umbrella term covering all of these aspects. It's the fundamental to all disciplines, fields, and approaches concerned with researching and designing computer-based systems for people. So I love this photo. This is called Too Many Cooks in the Kitchen. The reason why I put this up is because software companies do have too many cooks in the kitchen, meaning they have someone from marketing, they have someone sometimes from sales, they have someone from PR, they have someone from the design team, they have someone from the coding team, the IT team, they have higher management involved, all of these people, and everyone has ideas. And they all come together and they have all these meetings and they all disagree with one another most of the time. Then finally, someone higher up says, no, this is the way it's going to be. This is what we're doing. And then during the process, someone says, I think this would be better this way. And so we're going to do it this way because our department's handling this part. So that's what we're going to do. And they get signed off on and they just go step, 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 step. And they keep doing this. And it's too many cooks in the kitchen because no one knows what the other one is doing. And the other thing is that usability testing and research isn't encompassed throughout any of this. It's what each person in your company, in your software company, thinks. Well, that's not going after your users, a typical person who's going to be using your product. And it certainly isn't getting their ideas implemented throughout the whole design process. So there's too many cooks in the kitchen, but it's the wrong cooks. You want to limit the amount of people who are involved in the design process as much as possible. And you want to make sure that you encompass usability research and testing throughout. Human-computer interaction, which is HCI, and interaction design have to be encompassed together. So with interaction design, you have design practices, graphic design, all of these things are encompassed and are involved within the design process. Human-computer interaction is very important. How is the user going to interact with the product? You have to think about that. So working in multidisciplinary teams is a great idea. So you have someone who has an HCI background in your company. You have someone who has a computer science background, so on and so forth. And you have all these people, but the problem is that they have different backgrounds. They all have different perspectives and ideas. The benefits are that you get more ideas and designs generated, but the disadvantages is that it's difficult to communicate and progress forward, the design process being created. So our point here is that you need to go with a company who encompasses all of these different areas into one. And so that's what we do here at Situated Research. That's our edge. And our edge, or our secret formula, is Dr. Sherritt. So he has an interdisciplinary degree in communication and information sciences. It's a PhD. He specialized in user experience research and usability testing within software and video games. He studied interactive marketing and behavioral psychology. He studied interaction analysis and participatory design, human engagement, motivation, and activity, cross-cultural communication and regional cultural dimensions, collaborative work, distributed cognition, and online communities, and human-computer interaction and mental models. And we encompass all of this into our usability testing and research, and we are the only ones in the world that do it. Before we started Situated Research, we did about 3 years worth of market research, and we are the only ones who do this. Dr. Sherritt is the only PhD in the world who specializes in all of these different areas and applies it to usability research. So our clients get the benefit of that because we actually do look at the overall user experience. We give you all of that feedback after testing each time, and you get that good, rich data that you can apply to your design and make it the best that it can be, the ultimate user experience. So your usability goals should be effectiveness, efficiency, safety, utility, learnability, and memorability. So how interfaces affect users? You want to get an emotional response from your users. Expressive icons. You want to make sure that you have dynamic icons, animations, voices, sounds, whatever draws the user in. Shapes, fonts, colors, and graphical elements influence the fun factor within your users, which keeps them coming and using the product more and more and more. Don't have your piece of software be the one that makes people frustrated at work or home. Because users get frustrated if something doesn't work. If it doesn't do what the user wants it to do or what they expected. Expectations, if they're not met, people get really mad. Just think about it. I can just be telling you stuff, but think about it in your everyday life. You go to a website that isn't user friendly. What do? You leave. You don't use it. You don't recommend it to anyone. What if you have a product that you use? Just as an example, I bought a very expensive vacuum a few years back. And I had friends who said, "Oh, I'm going to go buy this vacuum." And I was on Facebook and I said, "Don't buy it. It stinks. This happens, blah, blah, blah." I gave them the whole list of problems. And I said, "And I spent $500 for it." And they said, "Oh, I'm going to save my money." And I said, "Yeah, don't buy it." Word spreads, especially with social media now. My expectations were not met by buying that $500 vacuum. Make sure that your piece of software is not lacking information. Make sure that there are no error messages. Those really build frustration within users. Make sure the appearance is good. Make sure it's aesthetically pleasing to the user. They want to use it. It's enjoyable. It's not boring. It doesn't hurt their eyes. And make sure that there aren't many steps to complete a task. That really frustrates users, especially when it comes to web design. We have people where they have shopping carts on their website, so people have to order items, and it takes 6 to 10 steps to order a product. And then they ask all this information on the forms that you as a user are like, "You don't need to know that. You don't need to know my phone number or when to call me. I don't want to be called. I just want to order the product." Or, "You don't need to know how I got to your website. Who cares?" Yeah, the company wants to know those answers, but they aren't things that the user wants to answer in order to order a product. So they don't do it. They go to a different website. Same with a piece of software. If it takes several steps to accomplish a certain task, you did not meet the company's goals when designing that piece of software. You're frustrating the users, their employees, and they don't want to use it. You were supposed to make their life easier. Designing for collaboration. If you're designing a piece of software for collaboration, you want to make sure that it's social. You want to extend this to the interfaces. So Salesforce is a great example of this. They now just added onto the accounts a chat. So you can say that you're offline or online. You can actually chat with your salespeople if they're in Salesforce at the same time, which is kind of neat. And they make it enjoyable. They have a little chat box and I can see their face and I can talk to them and we can talk back and forth. It's really cool. If it wasn't like that, I wouldn't use it. So like Facebook's little chat box, I don't use it. I always say I'm offline because it's not fun to use. So those are two examples. You also have to look at synchronous communication, which is live, and asynchronous communication, which is back and forth. And CMC is combined with other activities. So let's talk about synchronous communication. That's live. So talking with voice, video phones, video conferencing, media spaces, texting, IM. There's benefits and there's also problems to this. Asynchronous communication is email, snail mail, bulletin boards, news groups, and there are benefits and problems to this as well. And when you're designing a product, you have to think about, are you using synchronous or asynchronous communication? What are the benefits? What are the problems going to be with this? So some designers, especially after I do this webinar, I get so many emails coming from designers who say, why do we have to go to this length? Well, we want to help designers. We want to help them to understand how to design interactive products that fit with what people want, need, and may desire in the future. We want designers to appreciate that one size does not fit all. We want you to identify any incorrect assumptions that may have about particular user groups. We also want you to be aware of both people's sensitivities and their capabilities. There are lots of pieces of software that come to us where it's like, okay, your typical user profile is this. Here's a user, and they're capable of more than what you're allowing in this piece of software. We also want the designers to design a design that's not too involved in what they're designing. So don't get too involved and forget about the user. So there are some barriers. There are some psychological barriers. There are some organizational barriers. But involving users will only lengthen development timelines and time to market. That's what we hear all the time from designers. We also hear usage scenarios and usability testing just add to the already sky-high number of requirements that we're already dealing with. And we hear we already have enough trouble managing our product development process. Adding users into the mix will make the process even more chaotic. We also hear it is problematic to get money and the permission from the projects to do this. It is not easy to get permission to spend money on doing usability. So what can we do to overcome these barriers? We have to analyze. We have to analyze our project variables, our users, and our resources. Basically, plan it and then manage it. So why do software projects fail? They fail all the time. Well, a couple of reasons are that you had poor requirement specifications to begin with. You had a bad relationship with management between customers and developers. Or, what can we do to prevent these situations from happening again and again? If you actively introduce usability during software development, you will not run into these problems. You will have happy users. You will have happy clients. So all those rebuttals that I went through, not cost effective, I can't get permission, it's going to run up the timeline, et cetera, et cetera. Here are your answers to those questions. A lot of designers and people who are involved in software companies always try to get usability people involved, outsourcing. And the higher ups say, we just don't have the money for it. We just can't do it. It's going to extend the timeline on the projects. We just don't want to do it. Well, here you go. Here are your answers to those questions. The benefits of usability. It will increase sales and revenue. It will. Think about it. If your users are happy, they're going to continue to purchase your products. They're also going to spread the word. It's going to improve feature use. You're going to get better user performance and increase productivity. So if a company comes to you with a problem, you build a piece of software and encompass usability, everyone's happy. Guess what? They're going to spread the word. They're going to tell their other companies, their friends. When they're golfing, they're going to be like, oh, this company made a piece of software for us, solve this problem. Everyone's happy. Productivity is up, increased sales and revenue. And they're going to be like, oh, what's the name of that company? Maybe they can help us. You're also going to get decreased training and support costs. You're going to reduce your development time and costs. It's actually more cost effective to incorporate usability research and testing throughout the whole design process than not at all. Think about it. If That one software company that I gave as an example built a piece of software, put it out to the public, sold a lot of it. Then their customer service line was ringing off the hook because people had problems with it. It didn't solve their problems, didn't make their life easier, and made it worse. So those people are complaining. A lot of people want their money back. They want to return the product. And now the software company is coming to us and saying, okay, well, we want to make our next version, but we want to make it better and solve these problems. Those people aren't coming back. They're not going to buy your product again. The first one sucked. Why would they buy the second version? Reduced maintenance costs. Increased customer satisfaction. If you did usability testing throughout, by the time you get to the end, you're not going to have that much to fix, and your users are going to be happy because you've been getting feedback from them the whole time. You're going to limit your chances of having to save your company by coming out with a new version quickly to satisfy customers because the first time failed. And that's what happened with this particular software company. So they came to us and they said, we understand now that usability testing and research has to be done throughout. We want to come out with our second version and we have 2 months. We said, whoa, 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 whoa. That's impossible. It can't be done. Well, we're just going to improve the glitches and the problems that we had in the first one. So we got customer feedback through our customer service line because it's been ringing off the hook for a month. And we have all this feedback. So let's just fix those problems. We said, that's not how you do it. So companies have that false conception that they can go ahead, hire us, and in 2 months' time have a better version, get increased sales and revenue, and make the public happy and get their reputation back. It's not going to happen that way. Don't even get in that boat. Start at the beginning. So now we're going to do questions. So at the very end, I always go to Q&A. And so if you do have any questions, go ahead and type those in your right-hand corner in your chat box, and we'll get to those in just a moment. So I want to leave you with our contact information. Again, we are Situated Research. You can contact us at info@situatedresearch.com. Our phone number is area code 630-522-0855. And our website is www.situatedresearch.com. So I don't see that we have any questions. So I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar now. Again, here's our contact information. If you do have questions later on, just feel free to email us. We'll be more than happy to help you out. Thank you again for attending today and have a wonderful day.